The rescue ship Bright Dawn had been prepared for a standard emergency evacuation. Captain Nezara and her crew expected to find survivors huddled in a damaged ship, barely alive, desperately waiting for rescue from one of the most dangerous planets in known space. Instead, they found a thriving research station with comfortable living quarters, abundant food production, and technology that made their own ship look primitive by comparison. "This cannot be correct," Captain Nezara muttered, checking her sensors for the third time. "Infernus 7 is a Class 12 death world. Nothing lives here. Nothing can live here." "Captain," her science officer reported, "I am detecting multiple structures on the surface, extensive power generation, atmospheric processing systems, and biosignatures that suggest not only living beings, but healthy living beings. That is impossible." "Yes, Captain. But the sensors do not lie." When the rescue team finally made it to the surface in their heavy-duty environmental suits, rated for extreme Deathworld conditions, they found Captain Veltar and the other survivors waiting for them in a garden. An actual garden with growing plants and comfortable seating, surrounded by structures that turned the planet's deadliest features into useful resources. "Welcome to Infernus Station," Deho said casually, wearing normal clothes in normal atmospheric conditions, while standing on a planet that should have killed him instantly. "Would you like some tea? We grow our own now." Captain Nezara spent 3 days on the surface, documenting everything the humans had built. Her scientific team ran every scan and test they could think of, trying to understand how any of this was possible. The readings they got back made no sense according to everything they knew about survival and engineering. The power output from their geothermal systems exceeds what most colonies produce, the chief engineer reported. Their atmospheric processing is more efficient than anything in our databases, and their agricultural yields would make agricultural worlds jealous. All of this built with crash debris and basic tools, the science officer added. No advanced technology, no exotic materials, just standard emergency supplies and salvaged components. Captain Nezara stood in the observation deck of what had once been an impossible shelter, looking out at a death world that had been turned into a functioning research station. How, was all she could ask. "Engineering is just problem-solving," Deho explained. "Every problem has a solution if you think about it correctly. This planet had problems like extreme heat, toxic atmosphere, corrosive environment. But it also had solutions like unlimited geothermal energy, rich mineral deposits, and unique atmospheric chemistry perfect for specialized processes." Nari joined them, carrying a tablet full of research data. "We have discovered 17 new chemical processes that only work under these extreme conditions. Mineral combinations that could revolutionize materials science, and biological adaptations that could help life survive in previously impossible environments. You could publish research papers for decades based on what you have learned here," Captain Nezara said. "That is the plan," Nari smiled. "Along with proper laboratory facilities for visiting scientists who want to study extreme environment adaptation, the rescue operation became something completely different. Instead of evacuating survivors, Captain Nezara found herself coordinating the first supply run to humanity's newest research station. The aliens were rescued and returned to their home worlds with stories that no one would believe, but the humans stayed behind with requests for specific equipment and supplies. "You are absolutely certain you want to stay here?" Captain Nezara asked one final time before departure. "This is still one of the most dangerous planets in known space." Deho gestured around their comfortable home, where morning light streamed through windows, while outside the planet continued its daily cycle of volcanic activity and toxic storms. "Captain, I have lived on airless moons where one system failure meant death in 15 seconds. I have worked asteroid mines where a single mistake meant floating dead in space forever. This place has atmosphere, plenty of raw materials, unlimited energy, and the most interesting engineering challenges I have ever encountered. Plus, the vegetables taste amazing," Nari added, harvesting breakfast from plants that thrived in radioactive soil. 6 months later, the story had spread throughout the galaxy. In trading stations and diplomatic centers, beings from dozens of species whispered about the humans who had crashed on Infernus 7 and decided to stay. The planet that had been marked as completely uninhabitable was now home to a research station that produced scientific breakthroughs weekly. Applications to visit the station came from universities across known space. Xenobiologists wanted to study the adapted plant life. Engineers wanted to learn about extreme environment construction techniques. Atmospheric specialists wanted to understand how the humans turned poison gas into breathable air. But the applications were carefully screened. The humans had learned that while they could thrive in impossible conditions, most other species could not. Visitors came for short research periods in specialized protective gear, marveling at humans who worked in normal clothes in conditions that would kill most life forms instantly. The Galactic Survival Database had to create a new classification for Infernus 7. It was no longer listed as a Class 12 Deathworld. The new entry read, Planet Classification, Human Habitat Extreme Research Facility. Warning, approach with extreme caution. Environmental conditions remain lethal to most known life forms. However, resident human population has established permanent facilities and reports excellent living conditions. Visiting researchers should bring proper environmental protection and low expectations for comfort levels that humans consider normal. Note: accepting invitations to meals is not recommended unless you enjoy flavors that should not exist and vegetables that glow in the dark. The entry was written by Captain Veltar, who had become something of an expert on human survival capabilities. He spent his retirement years giving lectures about his month on Infernus 7, though most aliens refused to believe his stories. Humans do not conquer worlds, he would tell audiences who thought he was exaggerating. They adopt them. The most hostile environments in the galaxy become their neighborhoods. They do not just survive impossible conditions. They make those conditions better than the paradise worlds the rest of us evolved on. Back on Infernus 7, Deho was installing improvements to their latest expansion project, while Nari harvested crops that continued to amaze visiting scientists. The morning volcanic activity provided their usual background noise while they worked in the garden they had built in hell. The new atmospheric processor is working perfectly, Deho reported. Power output is up another 15% from last week. Excellent. The research teams arriving next month will need the extra capacity. Nari paused in her work to watch the sunrise paint the toxic sky in brilliant colors. You know, I think this might be the most beautiful planet I have ever lived on. Definitely the most interesting, Deho agreed, making notes for tomorrow's engineering projects. Though I do miss having seasons, this place is pretty much the same level of deadly all year round. Well, Nari said, smiling as she watched. Acid rain began to fall on their collection surfaces, turning poison into pure water. Nobody said paradise had to be boring. Outside their impossible home, Infernus 7 continued its eternal dance of destruction and creation. Inside, two humans continued their work of turning hell into home, one innovation at a time, proving once again that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their weapons, but their absolute refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. 1 month after the crash, the shelter had become something that defied every law of survival the aliens thought they knew. What once was a basic emergency structure now covered nearly half an acre of ground, with multiple connected buildings, and specialized facilities that would make starbase commanders jealous. Captain Veltar stood in what Nari called the observation deck, looking out through reinforced, transparent aluminum at the hellish landscape beyond. But instead of the chaotic destruction they had crashed into, he now saw order and purpose. The humans had not just built a shelter, they had built a system. The morning harvest is ready, Nari called from the agricultural section. She was carrying a basket filled with vegetables that should not exist, grown in soil that should kill everything it touched, watered with acid rain that had been processed into pure nutrition. Which varieties today? Deho asked, looking up from the manufacturing station where he was building components for their next expansion project. The heat-root tubers came out perfectly, better flavor than the last batch, and the sulfur fruit is ready for processing into those protein concentrates. Nari held up a bright yellow fruit that glowed slightly from its internal chemistry. Plus, we have enough thermal grain to make bread for everyone for the next 2 weeks. Engineer Quex examined the impossible vegetables with sensors that confirmed what his mind refused to accept. These plants are not just surviving in processed Deathworld soil. They are thriving better than agricultural products on garden worlds. The nutritional density is 3 times higher than standard food crops. Makes sense, Deho said, taking a break from his work to sample the new harvest. All those minerals and elements that make this planet deadly also make for very rich nutrition. These plants are getting nutrients you just cannot find in normal soil. Navigator Zeph floated over to join the conversation. He had stopped being afraid of the humans weeks ago, but he still could not understand them. My species travels between gas giants, trading with colonies that float in atmospheric layers rich with rare elements. Even our most advanced agricultural platforms cannot produce food this nutritious. That is because you are trying to control everything perfectly, Nari explained, leading them on a tour of the expanded growing areas. Perfect temperature, perfect atmospheric composition, perfect soil conditions, but perfect does not always mean optimal. She opened a door to reveal a growing chamber that looked like something from an alien nightmare. Plants with metallic silver leaves grew in soil that glowed faintly red from mineral content. Vines with blue fruit climbed supports made from processed volcanic glass. The air in the chamber was hot and humid, with a chemical smell that would make most beings sick. This is our experimental section, Nari continued proudly. These plants are adapted to love what would kill normal plants. That red glow in the soil, that is from radioactive minerals that provide energy directly to the plant roots. The chemical smell, that is sulfur compounds that these plants use for nutrition. Captain Veltar stared at food growing in radioactive poison soil and felt something break in his understanding of biology. How? How is any of this possible? Evolution and engineering working together, Deho answered, joining them in the nightmare garden. Nari found plants on Earth that already lived in extreme conditions, sulfur springs, radioactive areas, places with high mineral content. Then she helped them adapt even further to these specific conditions. I did not create new life, Nari corrected. I just gave existing life the chance to become what it always could be. Life wants to live everywhere. It just needs help figuring out how. The tour continued through sections that expanded the aliens' definition of possible. A workshop where Deho manufactured precision tools using volcanic glass and processed atmospheric metals. A power plant that generated electricity from temperature differences, atmospheric pressure changes, and geothermal sources. A water treatment facility that could turn acid rain, toxic groundwater, and poisonous atmospheric moisture into the purest drinking water any of them had ever tasted. We are generating surplus power, surplus food, surplus water, and surplus living space, Captain Veltar read from the daily status reports. These numbers show we could support 50 people comfortably, maybe 100 with some crowding. But there are only 5 of us. Well, we wanted to make sure we had enough capacity, Deho said. Better to build too much than too little. But what will you do with all the extra capacity? Quex asked. Nari and Deho exchanged one of their looks. The aliens had learned to recognize these looks. They usually meant the humans were about to do something impossible again. We have been thinking about that, Nari said slowly. This planet has resources nobody has ever studied properly. Mineral combinations that do not exist anywhere else. Unique atmospheric chemistry. Extreme conditions that could be useful for specialized manufacturing. You want to turn this death world into an industrial center? Zeph asked in amazement. Not industrial, Deho corrected. Research. scientific study. This place could teach us things about chemistry, biology, and engineering that we cannot learn anywhere else. Imagine what we could discover if we had proper laboratories and research equipment. A loud beeping sound interrupted their conversation. Captain Veltar's eyes widened as he recognized the signal. That is a rescue beacon response. Someone heard our emergency transmission. They gathered around the communication station as a voice came through the speakers. The transmission was weak and full of static, but clearly understandable. This is Captain Nezara of the rescue vessel Bright Dawn responding to emergency beacon. From cargo ship Stellar Hope. We have your location and are beginning approach to Infernus 7. Prepare for evacuation. Repeat. Prepare for evacuation. The aliens felt enormous relief at hearing those words. Rescue had finally come. They would be leaving this nightmare planet and returning to civilization, to safety, to normal life. But when they turned to share their joy with the humans, they found Deho and Nari having a quiet conversation near the window. Neither looked particularly excited about being rescued. "What is wrong?" Captain Veltar asked. "Are you not happy that rescue has arrived?" Deho looked out at the hell planet that had become their home. Steam rose from volcanic vents they had learned to use for heating. Acid rain fell on collection surfaces they had built to gather water. Toxic gas clouds drifted past atmospheric, processors that turn poison into breathable air. "Of course we are happy you will be rescued," he said finally. "You all deserve to get back to your families and your normal lives." "But," Nari added quietly, "but someone should stay here and study this place properly. This planet could teach us so much about survival, adaptation, and working with extreme environments. It would be a shame to just abandon all this research potential." Captain Veltar felt his heart skip several beats as he realized what the humans were suggesting. "You want to stay here? Voluntarily? On a Class 12 Deathworld?" Nari smiled and gestured around their comfortable, impossible home. "Look around, Captain. Does this look like a death world to you? We have everything we need here. Good food, clean water, unlimited power, interesting work, and beautiful sunsets." "Beautiful. Sunsets?" Quex repeated faintly. "Oh, yes," Deho said, pointing out the window where the deadly sun was setting behind volcanic peaks, painting the toxic sky in shades of orange and red that were actually quite lovely. "Wait until you see the aurora effects when the atmospheric chemistry gets really active. Absolutely gorgeous." The aliens could only stare as the two humans discussed staying on the planet that had nearly killed them all, talking about it like it was a vacation resort instead of one of the most hostile environments in known space. 2 weeks passed on Infernus 7, and the impossible shelter had become something even more impossible. What started as a basic survival structure had grown into a complex that would make engineers on civilized worlds shake their heads in disbelief. Captain Veltar woke each morning in his comfortable sleeping area, breathing clean air and drinking pure water, and still could not believe he was alive. Through the reinforced windows, he could see the hellscape outside continuing its endless dance of destruction. Lava flows, acid rain, toxic gas clouds, and volcanic eruptions happened every day. Yet inside their shelter, life was not just possible, but comfortable. "Morning energy output is up 12% from yesterday," Deho announced, checking readings on his control panel. "The new thermal collectors are working better than I expected. We have enough power now to run expansion systems if we want, to make the shelter bigger." Nari looked up from her laboratory workstation where she was studying samples of local minerals. "We might need the space soon. I think I figured out how to grow food using the processed atmospheric compounds. Real food, not just emergency rations." Engineer Quex's crystal body flickered with confusion. "Food? You mean agriculture? Here? In these conditions?" "Why not?" Nari pulled up data on her computer screen. "The soil composition is actually very rich once you remove the toxic elements. All those volcanic minerals provide excellent nutrition for plants, and the controlled environment in here is perfect for growing cycles." Navigator Zeph floated near the ceiling in his usual spot, no longer. Compressed into a panic ball, but still amazed by everything the humans did. My species has studied agriculture for thousands of years. We grow food in carefully controlled atmospheric conditions on gas giant platforms. Even we could not grow anything in a place like this. That is because you are thinking about it wrong, Deho said, making adjustments to their atmospheric processing system. You are trying to create perfect conditions for normal plants. We are creating normal conditions for perfect plants. I do not understand the difference, Captain Veltar admitted. Nari smiled and walked over to a new section of the shelter that had not been there the week before. Inside a sealed growing chamber, green shoots were sprouting from dark soil that should have been deadly poison. We are not growing normal earth plants here. We are growing earth plants that have been adapted for extreme conditions. Plants that evolved to live in places like volcanic hot springs, acid bogs, and mineral-rich caves. But how are they surviving the local minerals? Quex asked, examining the plants with fascination. My scans show toxins in that soil that would kill any organic life. They are not surviving the toxins, Deho explained. They are eating them. These plants actually need those minerals to grow properly. What is poison to most life forms is dinner to these plants. The aliens watched in amazement as Nari harvested the first crop of vegetables grown in hell. She sliced one of the strange fruits and offered pieces to everyone. Captain Veltar was the first to try it, and his compound eyes widened with surprise. "This tastes better than food from my homeworld," he said in shock. "How is that possible?" "The mineral content," Nari explained. "All those elements that make this planet deadly also make for very rich nutrition. These fruits have vitamins and minerals you cannot find anywhere else in the galaxy." Over the following days, the shelter continued to evolve. Deho installed new systems that captured and processed different types of atmospheric gases. Each system turned something deadly into something useful. Corrosive gases became cleaning agents. Toxic vapors were broken down into pure elements for manufacturing. Even the constant ash fall from volcanic activity was collected and processed into building materials. "You have created a closed-loop ecosystem," Quex observed, studying the shelter's operations. "Nothing goes to waste. Every input becomes a useful output. My species' most advanced habitats are not this efficient." "Waste is just resources you have not figured out how to use yet," Deho said, installing another improvement to their power systems. "This planet gives us lots of free energy and raw materials. We just have to be creative about how we use them." Captain Veltar was reviewing status reports that would have been impossible 2 weeks ago. Atmospheric processing at 100 and 10% of required capacity. Power generation at 150% of consumption. Food production exceeding nutritional needs. Water purification producing surplus clean water. He looked up at the two humans. "We are not just surviving here. We are thriving." "That was always the plan," Nari said, planting seeds for the next crop cycle. "Survival is just the first step. Once you have that figured out, you start making improvements." The aliens had begun to understand something that would change how they viewed humans forever. Other species in the galaxy saw hostile environments as problems to overcome with technology and resources. Humans saw hostile environments as opportunities to learn and grow stronger. "There is something I must ask," Captain Veltar said during their evening meal. "Your species has a reputation in the galaxy. Other races whisper stories about human worlds and human colonies. They say humans can live anywhere and make any place into a home. I always thought these were just stories to frighten children." Deho and Nari exchanged glances. "What kind of stories?" Nari asked. "Stories about humans who colonized worlds so cold that water freezes instantly in open air. Stories about humans who built cities in the hearts of gas giant storms. Stories about humans who made homes in asteroid belts where one mistake means floating dead in space forever." Veltar paused. "I thought they were myths." Impossible tales. Oh, those, Deho said casually. Yeah, those are all true. My cousin lives on Titan Station where the outside temperature is minus 200 degrees. My sister works the deep space mining platforms in the Vega system. Humans have been living in impossible places for centuries. But why? Zeph asked. Why choose to live in places that want to kill you when there are safe worlds available? Nari thought about this while she checked on their growing food plants. I guess because safe is boring, and because someone has to prove that impossible places are not really impossible. They are just places that nobody has figured out how to live in yet. Outside their comfortable shelter, Infernus 7 continued to rage with volcanic fury, toxic, storms, and temperatures that could melt metal. Inside, 5 beings from 3 different worlds were having dinner together, discussing plans for tomorrow's improvements to their impossible home. The humans had not just survived hell. They had made hell into a place worth living. Deho made it back to the airlock just as his suit finally gave up fighting the hostile environment. The left arm section was completely eaten through by acid rain that had started falling while he worked outside. His right boot was melting from walking on ground hot enough to cook meat. But he was alive, and he was carrying enough salvaged materials to fill the entire airlock chamber. Medical scan shows minor heat exposure and some chemical burns on his left arm, Nari reported, as she helped him out of the ruined environmental suit. But nothing serious. How is that even possible? Good suit design and better luck, Deho said, examining the hole in his sleeve where acid had eaten through 3 layers of protection. Plus, I worked fast. Next time, I will need better protection. For extended work periods. Captain Veltar stared at the human like he was seeing a ghost. Next time? You want to go back out there? We need shelter, Captain. This ship is not going to hold together much longer. As if to prove his point, another section of hull cracked somewhere deeper in the vessel, and they heard the hiss of more air escaping. I brought back enough materials to start building something that might actually keep us alive. Engineer Quex examined the salvaged items with his crystalline senses. These habitat modules are designed for Class 3 environments at most. The construction foam is standard grade. These materials cannot possibly withstand the conditions outside. Deho was already sorting through the materials and making notes on a small tablet. Not by themselves, no. But engineering is not about using materials the way they were designed. It is about making them do what you need them to do. Nari pulled up surface scans on her portable computer. The area about 200 meters east of here has some natural rock formations that could provide wind protection. Ground temperature is slightly lower there, too. Maybe only 300 degrees instead of 500. Perfect, natural foundation, and some environmental protection. Deho made more notes. We can use the ship's hull sections as additional shielding. The volcanic activity might actually help us, too. Navigator Zeph compressed into his worried ball shape again. Help us how? The volcanic activity is one of the things trying to kill us. Deho looked at the gaseous alien with the patient expression he used when explaining engineering concepts to non-engineers. Geothermal energy, Zeph. All that heat has to go somewhere. If we can tap into it properly, we have unlimited power. For cooling systems, atmospheric processing, whatever we need. The aliens exchanged looks that mixed amazement with horror. Captain Veltar had commanded ships for decades, but he had never met anyone who looked at a Class 12 Deathworld and saw opportunities instead of certain death. Over the next 6 hours, Deho made 3 more trips outside. Each time he came, back with more materials and more detailed plans. Nari joined him on the 4th trip, wearing a reinforced suit they built from spare parts and ship components. The atmospheric composition is actually perfect for some types of chemical processing, she reported after analyzing samples. All these toxic gases that would kill us can be broken down into useful elements. Oxygen, nitrogen, even some rare metals in vapor form. See? Deho said, welding pieces of ship hull together using a torch powered by bottled volcanic gas. Every problem is just a solution waiting to happen. Engineer Quex watched the humans work with growing fascination and terror. You are using thermal. Expansion as a structural advantage. My people would never consider such a thing. We control our environment perfectly to prevent any expansion or contraction. Control is good when you can have it, Deho agreed, sealing another joint. But adaptation is better when you cannot. This planet wants to expand and contract everything. So we build structures that expand and contract with it instead of fighting it. The shelter began to take shape over the following days. It looked nothing like any structure the aliens had ever seen. Instead of trying to keep the hostile environment out completely, it seemed designed to work with the environment. Channels directed the acid rain into collection and processing systems. Thermal vents were incorporated into the foundation to provide heating and power. Even the constant volcanic tremors were dampened by a suspension system that let the whole structure move with the ground instead of breaking apart. "This is impossible," Captain Veltar whispered, watching Deho install an atmospheric processor that turned poisonous outside air into breathable atmosphere inside the shelter. "Our best engineers with unlimited resources could not build something like this. You are doing it with crash debris and basic tools." Nari was setting up a small laboratory section where she could study the local environment. Deho grew up on Luna Colony, remember? When you learn to live in vacuum with only what you can build yourself, this kind of challenge is actually easier. At least this planet has an atmosphere, even if it wants to kill us. "The atmosphere wants to kill us," Zeph repeated in amazement. "And you call that easier?" "Sure. On Luna, if your shelter fails, you die in 15 seconds when your blood boils. In vacuum. Here, if the shelter fails, we might have whole minutes to fix it before the heat gets us." Deho connected the last power cable to their geothermal generator. Much more forgiving. The aliens could only stare as lights came on inside the impossible shelter. Through the reinforced windows, they could see a living space that looked more comfortable than their ship had been. The temperature inside was a pleasant 22 degrees. The air was clean and fresh. There was even the sound of running water from a purification system that turned acid rain into drinking water. "How?" was all Captain Veltar could manage to say. Deho wiped sweat from his forehead and smiled. "Same way you do anything difficult, Captain. One piece at a time, and do not stop until it works." Outside, the planet continued its attempt to kill everything on its surface. Inside, 5 survivors from 3 different species sat down to their first hot meal since the crash, in a shelter that should not exist, built by humans who refused to accept the word impossible. Captain Veltar moved as fast as his injured arms would let him. He caught up to Deho just as the human reached the airlock door. The insect alien grabbed the human's shoulder with one good arm. "Please, you must listen to me." Veltar's voice shook with fear. "I have seen Deathworlds before. I have lost good crew members to planets far safer than this one. My homeworld of Kither Prime gets hot sometimes. Maybe 50 degrees on the worst summer day. When that happens, we all stay inside with cooling systems running at full power. This planet is 8 times hotter than our worst day." Deho stopped and looked at the captain with kind eyes. He could see the real terror there. This was not just fear of death. This was fear of watching someone die when you could do nothing to help. "I understand, Captain, but staying inside is not going to save us. We have 6 hours of air left, maybe less. The hull is cracked and getting worse every minute. If I do not go out there and find materials to fix this ship or build shelter, we all die anyway." Nari walked up carrying 2 large bags of equipment. "I pulled together everything useful from medical and science storage. Emergency suit patches, atmospheric processors, basic tools." She handed one bag to Deho. "I also found the emergency construction foam and some power cells." Engineer Quex flickered bright red again. "The emergency suits are rated for Class 6 environments maximum. This is Class 12. The difference is like comparing a candle flame to the surface of a star. Deho started putting on his emergency environmental suit. The silver material looked thin and fragile compared to the hell waiting outside. Then we better work fast and not waste time. Navigator Zeph finally uncompressed from his panic ball and floated down to join the conversation. Human Deho, please understand. My species evolved in gas giant atmospheres. We can survive in conditions that would crush most solid life forms. Even we would die in seconds out there. The atmospheric pressure alone will collapse your lungs. The heat will cook your blood. The toxic gases will eat through your suit in minutes. Deho sealed his helmet and checked the suit's systems. Everything showed green lights, but he knew those lights would not stay green for long outside. How long do you think I have before the suit fails completely? Nari ran calculations on her scanner. In these conditions, maybe 20 minutes if you are lucky, 15 if you are not. Then I better make those 20 minutes count. Deho picked up his equipment bag and a portable scanner. Keep monitoring my suit status from in here. If things go really bad, seal the airlock and do not open it again until rescue comes. Captain Veltar made a sound like crying. In his 40 years of command, he had never ordered someone to their death. He had never watched someone volunteer for certain death either. There has to be another way, some other choice. There is always another choice, Captain. We can all sit in here and die together when the air runs out, or we can try to live. Deho stepped into the airlock chamber. I vote for trying to live. The K. Inner airlock door sealed with a solid thunk that sounded like a tomb closing. Through the small window, the aliens could see Deho checking his equipment one more time. He gave them a thumbs-up gesture that meant good luck in human culture, but looked like a goodbye to everyone else. The outer door began to open. The sound hit them first. Even through the thick metal walls of the ship, they could hear the howling, whined outside. It sounded like all the demons in the universe screaming at once. Hot air rushed into the airlock chamber, and warning lights flashed as the ship's sensors detected the poison atmosphere trying to get inside. Deho stepped out onto the surface of Infernus 7. Nari immediately started monitoring his vital signs on her scanner. Heart rate steady, suit pressure holding, temperature rising but still safe inside the suit. Through the ship's external cameras, they watched the human walk away from the crashed vessel. The landscape around them looked like a painting of hell made real. Black volcanic rock stretched in all directions, broken by rivers of flowing lava that glowed orange and red. Steam and toxic gases rose from cracks in the ground. In the distance, volcanic mountains shot columns of fire into the poisonous sky. The wind was so strong it should have knocked Deho down, but somehow he kept walking, forward. His suit was already changing color from the heat, going from silver to dull brown as the extreme temperature affected the material. Suit temperature rising past safe levels, Nari reported, trying to keep her voice calm. External sensors show ground temperature around his boots is over 500 degrees. How is he still walking? Quex asked in amazement. Those conditions should have killed him already. Through the radio, they could hear Deho's voice. He sounded completely calm, like he was taking a walk in a peaceful garden instead of hiking through the landscape of nightmares. Okay, I can see the cargo sections from here. Looks like cargo hold 3 broke open completely. Lots of useful materials scattered around. I am seeing metal sheets, construction foam canisters, even some of those modular habitat sections we were carrying to the Kepler colonies. A massive geyser of superheated gas erupted from the ground just 30 meters to his left. The blast was so powerful it shook the crashed ship. The aliens all flinched and made sounds of terror. Deho just kept walking. That was exciting. Good thing it missed me. The heat signature on my scanner suggests there are more geysers in this area. I will need to map them before setting up any permanent structures. Permanent structures? Captain Veltar whispered. He is talking about permanent structures in this hell. Nari was watching her scanner readings with growing amazement. His suit should have failed by now. The heat, the corrosive atmosphere, the pressure differences. But somehow he is still alive and moving. Through the camera, they watched Daeho reach the scattered cargo. He began sorting through materials with the same methodical patience he used for any engineering job. When a piece of metal was too hot to touch even through his insulated gloves, he found a way to move it with tools. When toxic gases made visibility poor, he used his scanner to identify useful items. Found the emergency habitat modules, his voice came through the radio. Most are damaged, but I can work with damaged. Also found a nice supply of thermal-resistant building foam and some power cells that look intact. The ground near him cracked open, releasing a cloud of gas so toxic it would kill most life forms instantly just from breathing at once. Daeho stepped around the crack and kept working. Suit breach in left arm section, Nari announced with worry. Small hole but growing. 15 minutes left, maybe less. Copy that, Daeho replied. I have what I need. Heading back now. As they watched him walk back toward the ship carrying salvaged materials, the aliens began to understand something that would change how they saw humans forever. This was not bravery or stupidity. This was something else entirely. This was what humans called Tuesday. The warning alarms screamed through the cargo vessel's stellar hope like angry metal birds. Red lights flashed across every surface while the ship shook and twisted through space like a dying animal. Captain Veltar gripped his command chair with all four of his insect arms as sparks flew from broken control panels around the bridge. Engine core failure spreading to secondary systems, shouted Engineer Quex from across the room. The crystalline alien's body glowed bright orange with stress, casting strange shadows on the walls. We have maybe 3 minutes before complete. Power loss. Navigator Zeph floated near the ceiling in pure panic mode. The gaseous alien's form kept changing shape as fear took over. There is nowhere safe to land in this system. All planets are death worlds, class 9 or worse. Daeho Kim stood calmly near the engineering station, watching the readouts with quiet eyes. The human engineer wore the same blue work uniform he put on every morning for the past 2 years aboard this ship. His black hair was messy from sleep when the alarms woke him, but his hands were steady as he checked the damage reports. What about that one? Daeho said, pointing to a red dot on the star map. His voice was so calm it made the aliens stop. Their panic for a moment. That is Infernus 7. Captain Veltar clicked his mandibles in horror. Class 12 Deathworld. Surface temperature over 800 degrees. Toxic atmosphere. Acid rain. Volcanic activity everywhere. Nothing lives there. Nothing can live there. Daeho nodded like the captain had just told him about the weather. Sounds rough, but we need somewhere to put down, and that is the only planet in range. He walked over to his colleague, Nari Yoon, who was strapped into a safety seat nearby. What do you think, Nari? Dr. Nari Yoon looked up from her portable scanner where she was reading data about the approaching planet. The young xenobiologist had worked with Daeho for 3 years now, and she knew that look on his face. It was the same look he got when someone told him a job could not be done. The atmospheric readings are pretty bad, she said in her quiet way, but we have emergency suits, and you built that shelter on Kepler Station when the life support failed. This is just bigger. The aliens stared at both humans like they were watching creatures from a nightmare. Captain Veltar had served in space for 40 years. He had seen many death worlds from safe orbit. He had never seen any living thing look at a Class 12 planet and call it just bigger than anything else. You do not understand, Veltar tried. Again. My homeworld gets hot sometimes. Maybe 50 degrees on the worst day. This planet will cook you in seconds. The air will burn your lungs. The rain will melt your skin. Daeho was already moving toward the emergency supply lockers. Good thing we have those suits, then. How long until we hit atmosphere? 2 minutes and falling fast, Quex announced. The crystal alien's glow was now deep red with terror. I cannot. Control our descent. We are going to crash hard. The ship began to shake worse as it hit the outer atmosphere of Infernus 7. Through the main view screen, they could see the planet growing larger. It looked like a ball of fire and poison. Orange clouds swirled around continents of black volcanic rock. Lightning flashed constantly through the toxic air. Massive storms raged across the surface like angry gods fighting each other. Everyone strap in tight, Captain Veltar ordered. This is going to be very bad. Deho helped Nari check her safety straps, then locked himself into the seat next to her. He looked out at the approaching hell world with the same expression. He might use to watch a sunset. Nari noticed this and smiled a little despite their situation. Remember that time we got stuck in the ice storm on Europa Station? She asked him. Yeah, good times. We made it work then, too. The aliens could not believe what they were hearing. These humans were talking about survival on a Class 12 death world, like it was a minor problem to solve. Navigator Zeph compressed into a tight ball of gas near the ceiling, trying to make himself as small as possible. The ship hit the surface of Infernus 7 like a hammer hitting glass. Metal screamed as the hull scraped across volcanic rock. Systems exploded in showers of sparks. The artificial gravity failed, sending loose objects flying through the air. Emergency lighting flickered on as the main power died completely. When everything finally stopped moving, silence fell over the bridge, except for the hiss of escaping air and the groan of stressed metal. Outside, they could hear the howl of wind. That sounded like the screaming of demons. Captain Veltar slowly uncurled from his crash position. 2 of his arms were hurt, but he was alive. Around the bridge, the other survivors were checking themselves for damage. Quex had several cracks in his crystal body that glowed with internal light. Navigator Zeph was still compressed into his panic ball. Only the 2 humans seemed completely unaffected by the crash. Deho was already out of his seat, checking the emergency systems panel. Nari was scanning the area with her portable sensors. Hull breach in sections 4 and 7, Deho reported. Environmental systems are offline. Emergency power only. We have maybe 6 hours of air left in here. Outside air is 90% toxic, Nari added, reading her scanner. Surface temperature 420 degrees and climbing. As the sun comes up. Acid rain starting in maybe an hour, based on those cloud patterns. The aliens looked at the readings and felt their souls leave their bodies. These conditions would kill them in less than a minute outside the ship. Even their best environmental suits were not designed for anything this extreme. But Deho was already putting on his work boots. I need to get outside and see what we can salvage from the cargo holds, maybe find some better materials for shelter. You cannot go out there, Captain Veltar said, his voice high with panic. It will kill you instantly. Deho looked at him with patient eyes. Captain, I grew up on Luna Colony. When the solar storm hit in 2387, I spent 6 days outside in a broken suit fixing the reactor. Before that, I worked the deep asteroid mines where one small mistake meant floating dead in space forever. He picked up his emergency kit. This is just another day at the office. The aliens watched in complete horror as the human walked toward the airlock, whistling softly to himself.